Hello and welcome to the Liverpool Daily News. I'm your host, David Comerford, and I'm joined by James Martin. There's only really one place for us to start this morning, and it's with yesterday's unbelievable World Cup final. I think before we get into Konate and Fernandez, which obviously are going to be our main talking points today, James, I just wanted to ask you briefly, and maybe not the fairest question to ask in brief, but for you, if you had to decide which game was better, yesterday or the Istanbul final, which one are you going for?
Oh, that's brutal to give me on the spot. I think as well, like when you're on a Liverpool fan channel and you're talking and you're two Liverpool fans, it's hard to have any particular perspective that isn't biased, especially when we're not French or Argentinian. So for me, I'd still go Istanbul. If I were a neutral, maybe I'd give a different answer. But even if you try and bring a little bit of sort of fairness into it, you have to say, I mean, you know, three of the goals were penalties. That's the second Argentina goal was a work of art, but for the most part, exciting as it was, like were there that many sort of incredible moments? I mean, even as a Liverpool fan, you have to say some of the Milan goals in that Istanbul game were incredible. The first half was just a showcase of one of the best club teams around at the time. And then, of course, the comeback was on a greater scale as well from three goals down. So, yeah, if we're having to pick, I'd still go Istanbul. But in terms of World Cup finals, yeah, it's the best in our lifetime for sure.
Yeah, I think probably the best sort of international game ever, maybe, and Istanbul can still claim the best club game title. I just think it's a slightly better story, maybe in how it panned out. Although obviously the fact that you've got kind of Messi and Mbappe slugging it out as well, there's a very strong argument, I suppose, for yesterday. But moving then on to our main kind of focus points for today. We'll start with Ibrahima Konate, Liverpool's representative in the final. Didn't start the game in the end. Obviously, he's been struggling in the build-up with some kind of illness issues. Do you think that was probably what swayed it? And if you think it was maybe a tactical decision, was it potentially a mistake from Deschamps, or did Upamecano's performance justify it either way?
Yeah, I feel bad for Deschamps because it's a tricky task picking a team for the World Cup final at the best of times, and then when a virus is sort of sweeping through the camp and seemingly claiming a new victim every day, it adds an extra dimension into the mix. So if he was already sort of struggling to pick between Upamecano and Konate, which you could sort of understand, if Konate was showing worse symptoms, then you can understand that swaying it for him, and that seemed to be the gist of what L'Equipe were saying in the build-up. They were saying Konate was showing more pronounced symptoms than Varane, who'd also picked it up before the game, and then sure enough, Varane starts, and then when he came off for Konate, he looked absolutely spent. So, you don't want to speculate too strongly, but clearly there was something amiss in the camp in the build-up, and Konate was a part of that. So I imagine that's probably what swung it. So you don't want to come out too strong and say it was a massive error, but equally, even in the sort of 10, 15 minutes he did get, he did sort of show what France were missing in a way. I mean, not so much defensively, but he played the pass that could have won the World Cup, the Kolo Muani chance that it was an incredible save from Martinez. I've seen some people criticising Kolo Muani. I think that's harsh. The ball was coming over his shoulder. It was not an easy one to bury. Martinez made himself massive. I think it was more a good save than a bad miss, but it was a clear-cut chance, and that was put on the plate by Konate. Some will say he was just sort of hoofing it forward, but I think it was a very good pass, to be honest with you. It's an interesting one. We've not necessarily seen too much of that side of his game at Liverpool. He's played some nice passes, but not really been a chance creator in that sense with those kind of moves. But he's clearly got it in the locker. He's a very technically proficient defender. That's not to say Upamecano and Varane aren't, but it was certainly sort of sent a message when he came on and did that. But defensively as well, yeah, I mean, he's conceded twice when he's played in 3 games this tournament. Obviously lesser opposition, but France conceded 3 in the one game in the final. And obviously Argentina also conceded 3, but you would say normally if you're conceding 3 goals in a final, you're going to struggle to win it. And yeah, I mean, no one will ever know if Konate, particularly somewhere short of fully fit Konate, would have made the difference. But yeah, it's bound to be what might have been in his mind and in the mind of Deschamps. And I think most Liverpool fans would probably say, yeah, probably he should have got the nod.
Yeah, I think it's probably one of them. Club allegiance obviously plays a part. I think I'm right in saying as well that Konate won the corner that actually led to the equalising goal, or certainly to one of the goals, maybe a penalty. So like you say, contributing probably more so offensively, just given the circumstances of the game. In terms of the repercussions of this, now we saw last season that Salah lost in the final of the African Cup of Nations. His form then sort of tails off second half of the season. Granted, there could definitely have been other explanations for that. Fatigue could have played a bigger part. But do you think Konate might struggle to deal with this? My kind of school of thought on it is that because he didn't play too much, he might not feel as much responsibility. Whereas with Salah, obviously, I think he potentially missed a penalty in the final, or maybe it was that final where he didn't take one. But either way, he's the leader of his nation, so he would kind of feel like it falls on his shoulders. Whereas with Konate being kind of in and out the side, maybe it doesn't hurt quite as much. Is that fair?
Yeah, I don't know whether it doesn't hurt as much, but I think maybe the repercussions are less severe, and maybe it doesn't hurt for as long. I think there's a pool of maybe 3 or 4 players who understood what Mo Salah was going through in the African Cup of Nations, because he truly was just carrying the entire hopes of that team, of that nation on his shoulders. He's by far and away their best player. He's their captain. And also, given the respective ages, it's not necessarily his last chance, but, it's one of his last chances. So all of those things combined for Salah. And then, of course, like you say, with the way that shootout panned out, that also was particularly cruel. And like you say, Konate wasn't involved for the vast majority of the final, didn't take a spot kick or anything. So yeah, it's bound to have an impact. You come back having come so close to being crowned a world champion. It's bound to leave a bit of a hangover for a while. But yeah, tentatively, I would suggest it's not going to have as much of a knock-on impact as maybe it did on Salah.
And moving on, I guess, to a more positive focus then in terms of the winners, Argentina. Obviously, Enzo Fernandez, heavily linked with Liverpool, playing yesterday. Wins Young Player of the Tournament. Didn't actually start at the beginning of the tournament, but came into the side, scored, I think, in their second game, and then from that point on, made himself undroppable. If you're Liverpool watching this, are you sort of looking at it and saying, wow, he's really showing that he can perform on the absolute biggest stages? Because I think sometimes maybe with a player from Benfica, for example, the Portuguese league is sort of the 6th best league in Europe. So you maybe wonder how much that can translate to the highest level. Obviously, you look at the Champions League as well. But to have the World Cup as that kind of added evidence, I think Liverpool will be almost even more determined to sign him now. And obviously, in a second, we'll come on to the price tag repercussions, maybe.
I mean, let's be fair. If I'm Liverpool, I'm kicking myself that I let him go to Benfica in the first place, because by all accounts, Liverpool had an eye on him in Argentina, but understandably decided it's too much of a risk. How are you going to adapt to the Premier League, and not just the Premier League, but a club competing for the Premier League title straight out of Argentina? It's an understandable concern, and it's very easy to be sort of kept in hindsight about it. But yeah, when they're looking at him now, they're looking at, like you say, how he's performed in Portugal and how he's translated that effortlessly onto the World Cup stage, winning Young Player of the Tournament. It's equal parts frustrating and motivating, I suppose. I think it will make them even more keen to get him in. But yeah, as like you say, as we're about to come on to, I'm sure it will make it a little more complicated to bring him in as well. And given how cheaply Benfica acquired him in the summer, that will have a tinge of frustration and annoyance about it.
Yeah, there's a possibility that Liverpool could pay about 10 times more than they would have had they signed him last summer. And on that, there's been varying reports about Fernandez's release clause, but I think the most reliable ones say that it is kind of in the region of 100 million. If you're Benfica now and you can see a player like Bellingham, another one of Europe's best under 21 midfielders, selling for about 130, do you just say, you know what, we don't necessarily need to be negotiating for Fernandez. We should just literally be putting clubs to his release clause, and if you want to sign him, you are going to have to pay that 9-figure fee.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they've had him for 6 months. I don't know how long his contract is, but they're in a strong position, and yeah, I mean that's what release clauses are for. It's not like in Spain where the laws of the federation, they require everyone to have a release clause. It's not just a matter of course. This is something they've negotiated, as far as I'm aware, where it's like, okay, if he's going to go, that this is what someone's going to have to pay. And even if they do have to have release clauses in Portugal, I'm not 100% sure. The fact is they've put it at that level for a reason. So yeah, that's they've put themselves in a strong position, and now they're reaping the rewards. Whether that's 103 million or whether that's holding on to a great player for a bit longer, yeah, I don't see why they'd sell for much less, really.
Yeah, and the extent of competition probably means that they will be able to get that fee or close to it. I think we saw with Nunez, he maybe went for a little bit less than his release clause, but with Fernandez, we might not be so lucky. But yeah, that'll about do it for this morning. So thanks, James. And remember to check out all the written content that goes up on liverpool.com today. And we'll be back tomorrow morning for another stream. But yeah, until then, enjoy the rest of your day.